Hi, and welcome to Curation Conversations. Myself, Fern Potter. I'm joined by Dave Ajumobi from Two Circles, our head of programmatic. I'm really excited to have you here today. Thank you to talk to us about the incredible year that, I mean, even the quarter that we've already had, but the incredible year that we've got when it comes to sports advertising and all things sports. You know, I read recently that this year is set to be over $1 trillion spent in advertising when it comes to sports, which is just like phenomenal. But before we get into advertising, because you have got just an incredible story to your career, and Dave, how you got into programmatic, and this needs to be shared. So please tell us a bit about yourself. Like how did you land in programmatic, but and also in specifically the sports area?
Of course. By the way, thank you for having me. I'm really excited about today's conversation. But yeah, so my career, how did it start? I would say it did start obviously way before I was thinking about work, so to speak, because sport has always been a core part of who I am. You know, I think many people in this country, I started off in football and athletics to begin with. And then eventually basketball became my main focus. Essentially, I played here in the UK at a high level and had the opportunity to represent the likes of England and Nigeria on the national scale. And playing at that level really gave me an understanding that sport is bigger than the game itself. It's about identity. It's about pride and community. And so eventually when I started thinking about what a professional career would look like, I didn't immediately land back in sport. So when after leaving uni, I started working in digital and programmatic a bit more broadly. And over the years, it led me to Betway, so online sportsbook. Mm-hmm. And that was a really, really interesting place to learn about audiences, segmentation, and more about fans, So when we talk about fan behavior, we're looking at fixtures, we're looking at, peaks in attention and how sport matters in different regions. And just over time, I just became more interested in not only what happens on the pitch, but off the field as well. Yeah. The marketing, I would say the media and the growth strategies behind these sports organizations. So when I moved to Two Circles a couple of years ago, I would say it genuinely felt like coming home. It was a natural shift over the years, from competing earlier on in my life to working in programmatic and then transitioning into a role where I'm really actively helping organizations, compete commercially and grow their audiences.
That's incredible. I mean, first, because of, to represent your country and Nigeria, to be able to be at the forefront and do that, what an incredible career. And then, as you said, move into this kind of the corporate side of advertising and bring that knowledge into what you described so beautifully as like the fandom, the emotional state that you get when you're working, when you're supporting teams, being in that moment with your favorite sport, whether it's players, teams, the sport itself. Like you've got such an opportunity as a brand to really influence and work with the fans that are there in a wonderful environment, but also where there's so much passion, like there's so much emotion going through. And then you bring this to Two Circles. And so your role at Two Circles, like tell us a bit about the business and what you do and the clients that you're working with.
Okay, so at Two Circles, we are a sports and entertainment business where we help our clients grow both their revenues and their audiences. And essentially we do this by knowing fans the best. We understand, what fans are interested in, what content they consume, where they go, what they buy, all of which we use this knowledge and experience to help our clients achieve their business goals. And with regard to what I do personally, so I oversee our global programmatic strategy and delivery, which essentially is me building out our in-house capability whilst leading key partnerships to make sure that we deliver actually what works for our sports and entertainment clients. And so not just a generic digital media solution. It's very much sports and entertainment specific, very much curated to the digital campaigns that we're running and to the outcomes we're trying to achieve. And it's honestly, I feel like my role over the last couple of years at Two Circles has been as much about tech and operations as it is education as well. You know, talking to clients and internal teams. So we have an understanding of how to use programmatic in a way that's both commercially meaningful and as well as, you know, performance centric as well.
Yeah, I bet actually that's quite interesting. Whereby, so your time at Two Circles, have you really had to grow had to grow the programmatic strategy within your clients' businesses as well as the opportunities for outcomes?
I would say it's a mixture of things because, as you can imagine, you know, with the vast range of clients that we work with, a lot of them are at different stages in their, you know, digital journey, so to speak. So with some, you know, I've been helping them and guiding them to kind of determine what their strategy would look like from a programmatic perspective. And with some clients, you know, we do a lot of their media buying for them. So therefore, collaborating with them to understand what it is they're trying to achieve. Because again, from a sports perspective, even entertainment, you know, we're very much event led. So we have to understand, you know, in the long term, what we're trying to achieve, where the peaks are going to be in terms of, you know, attention and intent from the audiences that we're trying to reach, and then build the correct omni-channel strategies around that. So it is a combination of things depending on what the client is trying to achieve and where they're at in their journey.
Yeah, there's a lot of complexity, it sounds, within that, because you're having to pull that together. You mentioned omni-channel. You mentioned the audiences, that those signals that you have access to, and that depth of understanding that you have at Two Circles to be able to bring all of that audience persona to life within a brand's advertising campaign, and not to mention the outcomes piece as well, right? So you've got to drive business results. So
for sure.
How are you bringing all of that together for those brands, and what clients are you like, these guys are doing it really well?
So the way I look at things is we have to try and have a very much comprehensive overview of what we're trying to achieve and how. But the best way of doing that is understanding how to kind of look at the data. Me personally, I believe at looking at things in layers at times because sport doesn't necessarily behave like other categories. So I would say, for example, you know, the first layer is, you know, media exposure. So we're looking at reach, impressions, clicks, delivery, things like that, you know, the media metrics. And then the second is a very key and important one, fan behavior. So site visits, how often people are using their apps, you know, when they're logging in, what they're searching for. Basically, we're looking at how the audiences are moving in response to our media. And then the third is business outcomes. So that's looking at, you know, all of those lower funnel actions, ticket sales, subscriptions, renewals, whatever the commercial goal is. And that helps us have a comprehensive view, you know, tying those pieces of data together. And in regards to, you know, the clients that we work with, you know, we work with, you know, some big rights holders and some, you know, smaller brands and teams and things like that. So for the likes of like Wimbledon, you know, last year we had a great year with them, doing a lot of awareness in some markets and then more consideration in others. And then this year there may be a change in strategy, but we're still, you know, defining what we're trying to do there because, you know, it's in the tournament's going to be this summer. So they're, I would say, pretty much an advanced client of ours in terms of how we work with them and what we're trying to achieve because they have a lot of information, you know, that can help us kind of, you know, come back with ideas and strategies that we can collaborate on. And then you have some other smaller clients, you know, some teams or brands which are looking to lean on us to, you know, give them our experience and our knowledge about how to grow their businesses. You know, again, depending on what it is they're trying to achieve, whether it's, you know, to, you know, grow subscriptions or get tickets to events, to games, matches, whatever the case may be. We like to build a holistic digital strategy that fits what they're trying to achieve and then execute as best as we can.
Yeah, that's brilliant. As you said, with that depth of knowledge that you've got because of the focus that you have and really understanding the way that sports marketing and entertainment works and how fans feel and how you can kind of convert them in the moment. I think that's such a beautiful place to be in, to be able to lend yourself, as you say, one, to the education, but two, to really driving the bottom line. Because let's face it, I mean, you can't move anywhere these days. Every conversation's about outcomes. I mean, it's the current word across, I think, all of the media industry, but it's so important because then you've got that proof. And when, you're sat on all that information, you're just guiding the clients through that need state of what they need to deliver. You talked there about kind of Wimbledon and some other clients, but for, say, non-sports endemic clients, like, do you also see like programmatic playing a part in, a non-traditional, non-endemic kind of sports brands and bringing those partnerships together?
Yeah, so I do see that happening in the wider ecosystem. We haven't done as much work with those non-endemic brands at this point in time, but we have the capability to do so. But where I've kind of seen it personally, where I've seen it work is, I would say, a lot of tech brands, automotive as well. I think when a brand is able to respect the culture and understand sport, I think that they understand what the passion is about. They understand how to tap into the emotion of the sport. Then I feel like it makes sense and it really works for them. And if it's just an attention grab, if it's just trying to get some synergy or work off, gaining some halo effect off of sport, I don't think it works because it doesn't seem organic. And I feel like people can really see through that.
Oh, that's really interesting. So if you're going to do it in a kind of true partnership way and really have respect of the sport and the fans when they're in that moment, as opposed to being just adjacent to an event almost. Okay, that makes sense. That's good advice. Really good advice. You mentioned there a little bit about omnichannel. What channels are you seeing through your kind of programmatic lens that are taking up a lot of the investment and the revenue?
I would say over the last year, some of the biggest channels that we've seen an increase in is digital out of home and CTV. I just think that the way these channels have evolved over the last few years has been amazing, and it's just provided a lot of opportunities for our clients. And we've had instances where we've just seen natural synergy with these channels for what our clients are trying to achieve, especially from a global perspective. We're trying to reach audiences around the world. We're trying to, grab their attention and speak to them in a manner that, fits with the outcomes we're trying to achieve. And this out of home has really provided that for us, especially because of the dynamic element to the creative as well, and being able to kind of change things, depending on what's happening within a specific league or a game even. And that specific changes to those moments make a big difference to how, a fan that sees that ad, how they respond to it as well. And then from CTV, as you can imagine, it's huge. It's very fragmented, I would say, at this point in time. However, it's still very effective when you are able to activate it in the right way, being able to reach users whilst they're at home on a big screen, where they're fully leaned in, and being able to serve them the right messages at the right time, I think is very key. So those two channels, we've seen a huge increase in.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, again, you mentioned the dynamism that you need in the ad to be able to make impact, drive the outcomes, as you said, make sure the fan feels engaged in an authentic way. So programmatic really helps there from your digital at home. But yeah, you can't deny the growth of CTV, right? It's and streaming. I mean, for sports, what an incredible opportunity for businesses to be able to probably tap into environments that were perhaps quite cost prohibitive before or sold out essentially because this inventory was always kind of pre-bought and pre-booked, and then suddenly you've got CTV and fast available through programmatic channels. Like that opens up a wealth of opportunity, and I'm sure for you a lot of complexity. Quite
a bit, to be fair.
Is like curation helping there? Is curation helping you find those audiences and like build packages that help you navigate that complexity?
Yeah, I think so. When it comes to curation, just speak from a sports perspective, even though I'm sure it applies elsewhere, it's very important because I think with sport, context always matters. And so the environment around live sport is very much part of the experience. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to specific moments that we see throughout the year, specific, events, you don't want to kind of leave quality and transparency to chance as a media buyer and as an advertiser. You want to make sure that you are, buying via the best ways possible to give you the best outcomes, so that in practice, that looks like, I would say, cleaner supply paths, access to higher quality inventory, and definitely smarter use of data. So you essentially have less waste. And I personally see curation as giving you the opportunity to start from a stronger position rather than spending some time on a campaign trying to figure out what's working. So I really feel like curation as a whole gives us the ability to really be as efficient and gives us the right access to the places that we want to be and the users where they are.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess as much as you can talk a lot about the fans, you've still got to deliver to the brands that you work with that safe environment. Yes. They've got, the brand suitable environments as well. And be really cognizant of an individual's, idea of what privacy is and what consent is. And all of these kind of hurdles that we've gone throughout the evolution of programmatic over the last kind of 12 years. So where, we talked a bit about CTV and digital out of home. Is audio something that you're looking at as part of that omnichannel mix? Do you see opportunity there? Because I'm a massive F1 fan, Dave. And so I listen to multiple F1 podcasts. Now, I don't want to talk about this season because I think last time we caught up, the season hadn't started. Yeah. And I'm quite disappointed with the amount of chat around kilojoules and batteries as opposed to kph and engine power. To be honest with you, it feels a bit more like Mario Kart, but but I listen to all the sports podcasts all the time. Is that something again that you feel like you've got some real niche pockets of fandom that sit there that you can work with for brands?
Well, I feel like audio is seen as something that's overlooked. However, I believe it's just misunderstood because audio, it owns a very valuable piece of real estate, and that is access to a fan when a screen isn't present. And so it's very, very powerful, especially because it can be very persistent throughout the user journey in regards to being with a consumer throughout the day. So commuting to work, training at the gym, even at work, just included in their day-to-day routines. I mean, I'm sure at some point we've all listened to a podcast when we're just cleaning up at home as well. So, I feel like with audio, there's a genuine opportunity for all brands, to be fair, to access, their consumers or their target audience who are very much genuinely locked in. They have high attention during these, while they're listening to podcasts, especially again in sports podcasts where you're, like you mentioned with F1, you're choosing to listen to this piece of content and you're locked in for multiple episodes, whatever the case may be. But one thing I will say is when it comes to audio, I feel like audio works best when a brand understands how to show up in the media. Similar kind of learnings that you get from other channels where you can't necessarily copy and paste one asset from one channel to another and expect it to work as effectively as possible. You have to be very much intentional about showing up in your right channel and speaking natively to that channel. Otherwise, it can feel very forced. And when a brand is able to do that and is confident in its identity and understands the environment and can speak to the listener in a way that feels natural to that environment, it can be really effective because, again, it just feels more personal and direct, I would say.
Well, I think that's such good advice and such a good point. That cookie cutter approach doesn't work, does it? And
no,
I think you've got when you're engaged in podcasts, it's almost like you're there for the theme, but also the individual that's doing the podcast. Dak Shepard does F1, and I love his take on it. That's great, and so I don't need this kind of interruption. It's got to feel more intrinsic with the creator of the narrative almost. So, but huge opportunity. As you said, it feels slightly undervalued. I think misunderstood is probably where it is, which leads on to another kind of hot topic. And you've mentioned outcomes quite a bit. And I don't envy this role that you have, Dave, to be honest, as bridging all of that together in a multimedia plan where you've got to, find the fan, interact with them in the right way. How are you measuring that? Like, how are you approaching measurement?
I think, measurement isn't an easy task. I think I mentioned it earlier. And how, we look at it in layers. Yeah. It's not an easy task, but it just takes time. Especially, again, depending on who the client is and what data they have at hand, what we can collaborate on. We just have to figure out, essentially what success looks like for them as a business and for that digital campaign. We have to make sure that we're looking at all of the relevant pieces of data and tying it together in a manner that makes sense. And I feel like once you are, again, as a business and we're working with our clients, we have that relationship where we have honest and transparent conversations about what we're seeing on our side and what they're trying to achieve as well. But measurement isn't easy. Fragmentation is our reality. And so therefore we have to do our best to operate in it and being able to, find a way to be successful. Again, I really feel like it also is part of the client's responsibility to understand what success looks like for them, which we can help them do. And then we can, do our best to work towards it. But again, data is key, is one of the core components of everything that we work on here. And so making sure there's a focus on that is very important.
Yeah, I love that point around it's a collaborative effort, really, isn't it, to measure? I think we're quite quick as an industry to kind of go, right, who's accountable? But actually, to your point, with the fact there's data everywhere, like you from the buy side, the sell side, when you're at an agency, bridging all of that together and bring it into a holistic strategy that's based on the outcome requirements is a really important task that everyone needs to collaborate within to get the best out, I guess, and instead get the qualitative data as well for your audiences. I love that kind of joint responsibility towards driving measurement.
Collaboration is key, I would definitely say.
Yeah, that's such an important point. Mentioned a lot of data. Is AI perhaps helping you in any way analyze that? I'm trying to get AI into the conversation. That felt like an unnatural segue, but I'm putting it in there. You can't talk to people these days without AI popping up.
You made it about 20 minutes without mentioning it, so I think we did pretty good. We did pretty well.
Thanks. So are you looking at some, agentic future? What does that look like for you?
So AI sometimes can be a very controversial topic. However, it depends on, your outlook. But it looks like AI isn't going anywhere anytime soon. So why not find a way to kind of utilize it in what we do? So I see AI as a huge positive, especially for what I do in programmatic. It just kind of helps me do things a lot quicker than I was able to do. But one thing I would definitely lead with whenever having conversations about AI and using it is not necessarily allowing it to do the majority of my job, because, we are humans and we do have that element of understanding the businesses or the campaigns in which we're running in a way that AI isn't just able to do. So I think it's about understanding how to just utilize AI in your workflow, to be fair, whether it's your day-to-day, whether it's your media buying, optimization, whatever the case may be, because AI can just simply process signals at a scale that humans simply can't. So let's, leave certain things to them. However, always looking over what AI outputs, because with sport is emotional, it's cultural. And as humans, we understand the nuance. We understand the fan sentiment, rivalries, tone about what's happening around an event, the actual feeling. And that's what needs human judgment. So I would say that finding that balance of understanding how to incorporate AI into what we do. I mean, like you mentioned with like agentic buying and things like that, understanding how to kind of incorporate that into your workflow and how to execute that across campaigns, but also include that human element consistently. I think that when you find that right combination, I think that's when you're going to have a formula for success, I would say.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I think as you mentioned, it's the human context and the emotion. Like we talked a lot about sport as a culture, and that can be lost if you're looking at things in binary levels. But then there's a huge, and your layered structure. I think it's fantastic because you're bringing all of that wealth of context and emotion together into the planning and into the strategy and into the execution, where AI can help accelerate that. Perhaps you don't want to, as you mentioned, like it dilute the complexity almost of of all those touch points that you have with an individual throughout that journey. So it's really powerful. But yeah, the speed you can't deny, right? Where it can process. Yeah, exactly. Everyone there's a strategy and an interpretation somewhere. So if we leave AI to one side, if we're looking ahead, like we just said, this is a massive year for sports. I'm sure you've not had a moment to yourself so far this quarter. So we appreciate you taking time out, absolutely, to come and chat to us all. But with that in mind, like this year, what are you looking ahead at? What do you think is going to be really meaningful for you? Is it something new? Is it doing some of what you've always done? What excites you about the year ahead?
I would say, obviously, with this year being so significant for sport, just making sure that as a business and even just as an individual myself, which I think is important for many people to be able to do, is to understand how to be able to capitalize on this opportunity that we have on our hands with, the packed out sporting calendar. And what I think that looks like is just being up to date and skilled up to be able to be in position to execute on things. So, for example, one thing I've seen that has been very consistent, and I assume that this would be the case eventually, but with live sports, being able to target in the moment, because again, with CTV and streaming and, the proliferation of that across multiple leagues and how important, live events have become, there's a real opportunity to be able to programmatically access some of these very specific and key moments and being able to show up in those moments. And, I feel like that's one component I'm very excited to continue exploring this year as we go throughout the year. And then obviously with the World Cup and things like that, that's going to be very key. So just really looking forward to, as a business, exploring that. Personally being able to work on specific projects and seeing what those outcomes look like. And then afterwards, retrospectively seeing what worked, seeing what didn't, and how we could take those learnings into the future.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, you have so much insight. It's a good job the World Cup's only for every 4 years, and then you can just start building momentum for the following one. I can imagine it takes that long to process the information. Yeah. Oh, Dave, that's wonderful. Thank you for all your insight and expertise. I think, as you said, it's such a big year for sports, and being able to have that specialism that you have to bring that to brands endemic and non-endemic to be able to take advantage of some of these sports key moments, but do it in the right way. As you said, no intercepting and hoping for the best. You've got to be really culturally involved with individuals and the fans to do it right. I think is huge for this year. I'm sure so many people that need that expertise to be able to bring that media plan to life. Going to finish on a quick fire round.
Okay.
Are you ready? Hear me. Okay. And I reckon I can guess some of the answers to these questions, but I won't do. Favorite sport to watch?
I think you know the answer to that, basketball.
You still follow the teams you played for?
Pardon me? Oh, do I follow the teams that I play for? Not as much. I'm more so very limited with my time, so I kind of just follow the professional leagues like NBA and things like that.
Who's your team?
I follow players rather than teams.
Okay. Yeah, this is a good insight into the fandom. Yeah, tell me about the players.
More so, LeBron James and whether or not this is going to be his final year or not, which I doubt it very much will be.
Okay.
And then, SGA, who's having an amazing year. It was MVP last year. It looks like he could be MVP this year. And then the likes of Anthony Edwards, who's also like a star in Minnesota. And people sometimes call him the face of the NBA, but there's some uncertainty of whether he wants to kind of take that ownership. But he's an amazing player, and he genuinely needs to win a championship. But, he's almost there. So those are a few players that I follow at the moment.
That's incredible. I love it. So actually, this might lead into this question. If you could attend one global sporting event this year, what would it be? Oh, that's tricky.
So it's a very... Okay. If I could choose... I would say, if we're looking at this from where we are now, moving forward, and all the moments have passed, because I may have included the Super Bowl into this, perhaps.
Sure. Okay.
But I would say from here on out, I've always wanted to go to a basketball game in America. So like with the NBA, if I could go to like a game 7 of an NBA final and hoping that the game's actually close and help like a great game, I would love to go to an NBA game, like a final, because I feel like the atmosphere would just be on another level. And I would just like to see like the best players in the world on the court at the same time.
Wow. That'd be pretty heavy, wouldn't it? Like just so many emotions.
Yeah.
That was a tough one, I can imagine, especially with World Cup this year as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Favorite sports program of all time?
Of all time, jeez. I don't know if I can answer for all time, but I can definitely tell you what I've enjoyed the last few years.
Yeah.
I'll give you 2 answers, and again, they're both basketball related. The first one being The Last Dance on Netflix, covering Michael Jordan and his run. And then I'll say currently what I watch on an almost day-to-day basis, whenever it's on, is Inside the NBA. So that used to be on TNT, but I believe they've now moved to another broadcaster. But it's just an amazing program. It's a combination of analytics, entertainment, and it's just very, very much informative. I just like the way they present the sport, as well as entertain the viewers as well.
I love that. It's such a good point, though. There's so many more like under the hood of the sports leagues and businesses, isn't there? Those documentaries and and programming now that give you a lot more insight than we ever had before. It's become quite a popular kind of method, hasn't it?
Yeah.
That's cool. Very cool. Which sport? Oh, this leads on. I didn't even think about it. So, which sport has done the best job at modernizing its media engagement?
Okay, so from what I've actually seen personally, I think I'm going to try not to mention basketball and that NBA, but I definitely feel like F1 has become a little bit more like accessible with a lot of the things that I've seen. I just seem to see a lot more content out there. And I feel like they're starting to get into, storytelling to kind of bring people in throughout the year in regards to what's happening with the league and, the players and things like that. And I've seen a few documentaries out there. So I would say probably F1 at this point in time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they are doing it well. It's such a legacy sport. I mean, I know loads are, but I don't think it modernized properly until, maybe 5-6 years ago. And you've got, again, they did the Drive to Survive series through Netflix, which blew everything up, which is pretty cool. Just shame about the cars, but never mind. What have I got here? So commentary on or sound off?
Commentary on.
Yeah.
As long as the commentary obviously is amazing and makes sense, I think with the sound being on and kind of hearing the commentators, because you generally listen to the games like when you're watching it on TV, and it just makes sense. But some of the big moments, I feel like the commentary is also a part of it as well.
Yeah, like the build up and like the noise of the crowd as well, even though you hear that coming through. Big screen TV or mobile second screen?
Yeah, big screen TV, always.
But are you like to do second screen as well? If you got like, your data?
If there are like some additional pieces of content I want to consume, so like for example, if I'm watching a basketball game and I want to look at somebody's stats, for example, I might look at what they're doing, what they've done during the season. Or if again with the commentary, if they mention something that's pretty interesting, I might look it up, that kind of thing. But definitely, I would say the combination, but mainly big screen, I would say.
high production, like lovely, high quality. Which sport do you think is most undervalued by advertisers currently?
Okay. When it comes to being undervalued, I would just say women's sports in general. So what I've seen over the last year, even the last year, probably the last few years, is there's been a huge growth in both the WNBA and women's football. Again, with all the success that the Lionesses have had over the last couple of years, I feel like there's a huge opportunity there. And with WNBA, and some people even say the WNBA is more entertaining than the NBA. And there may be, I think there's an argument to be had there. So I feel like women's sports, I think there's a huge opportunity there. So until we kind of figure out and invest a lot more, I feel like they're really undervalued at this point in time.
Thanks, Dave, for championing that. I agree. I think that's definitely, well, a huge opportunity. As you said, the success that they've had, the viewership that you've now got. Let's attract that advertising dollar. Let's pay them. Let's get the investment into the sports and into the schools as well to bring youth development into the women's sport.
Sure. Yeah.
It's really, I hope it's really powerful. As you said, in both of those leagues, the success that they've had just has a profound impact on community and on the youth programs. So that's very cool. Right. Advertisers, invest
for sure.
What is the most overused sports marketing cliche?
Oh, I don't know. The most overused sports marketing cliche. I'm not sure I've got an answer for that, to be fair.
Wow, tricky question. All right, finally, VAR, game changer or game killer?
I'll say a combination of both, because if you kind of want to be fair, if you want to live in the moment, then obviously no VAR, and it is what it is. But I feel like there's some instances where VAR is needed for fairness, as long as it doesn't, it doesn't impact the enjoyment of the game. If it's done in a way that you barely notice it, then I think it's very much useful. So again, I'll say a combination of the both.
All right. I'll let you off with that one. That makes sense.
What's your choice?
Well, look, when Hamilton was denied his eighth, I would say he got his eighth in 2021 because of a decision on the final lap by, the F1 equivalent of VAR. I was gutted. I sobbed. I still can't watch it. I cry. Like it's we talked about the emotion of sports. It's the only time you'll see me sobbing. And that moment haunts me. As far as I'm concerned, Hamilton, 8-time world champion, whether people like that. But that's when, as you said, it just ruins the moment.
100%.
And I think So, but then quite rightly, they use it for track limits, which can give people, advantage within the race itself. So, I would follow your lead there. Used wisely, but also don't break my heart with it. Oh, Dave, thank you so much for joining us. I've really appreciated our conversation.
No worries at all.
It's excellent. I'm really excited to see what the year holds for you. Best of luck.
Thank you very much. I'm very much looking forward to it.
Take care, babe.
Take care. Bye.